My name is David Grimes, and I'm the VP of Engineering for Spectrum Enterprise Navisite. We'll be discussing a little bit about vSphere, including versions 6.0 and 6.5. So our primary use case for vSphere actually is not a primary use case because we actually offer a pretty wide breadth of services, but our key use cases really revolve around hosted private cloud, as well as being the underpinning virtualization platform for our multi-tenant vCloud Director-based cloud. Some of the most valuable features of vSphere really have to be the ones that Pat gets most excited about, which is vMotion, because it does rock. It really radically changes the way we think about how we can operate a large infrastructure, and notably in terms of proactive maintenance. That's probably number one. I'd say the second biggest feature really is HA, because complexity around IT resilience is a difficult problem to solve, especially at the application level. And so being able to rely on the infrastructure to provide what in 90-10 rule, 99-1 rule is more than enough resilience for most applications, and getting that directly from the infrastructure is fantastic. So these features are useful for us day to day because we operate a very large number of single tenant private ESX deployments managed by vCenter, as well as VCD based public cloud. And frankly, with hundreds and thousands of hosts under management, there's no way we could operate that infrastructure, notably without the use of vMotion, because the ability to migrate those workloads to free up the physical infrastructure for maintenance activities, patching, BIOS updates, whatever it may be, frankly, it's a critical requirement to operate at all. So some of the features in vSphere that are important to us from a security perspective are VM encryption. As is the right thing to do in this day and age in the environment in which we all operate, security needs to be the number one concern for any IT operator. And while there are security solutions that can be delivered kind of at the physical layer, at the hardware layer, if you will, they don't necessarily address all of the requirements from an encryption perspective. So being able to have VM-centric, VM-level encryption is a great feature of vSphere. So we host infrastructure for a very large number of clients, and in many cases we're actually running all of their mission critical applications in our data centers, all running on top of vSphere. So there's no real single industry vertical, but for each of our clients, we are their operator, and it is their mission critical infrastructure. So when I think about the performance aspects of vSphere, we've been using it since actually before there was vSphere. We were actually a very early partner of VMware. I actually recall I've been with Navisite for a very long time, and I recall doing a VMware GSX deployment, which dates that for quite a number of years ago. But when I look at the performance aspects, I've actually definitely seen a reduction over the versions, notably from 4 to 5 and then into 6 and 6.5, with the virtualization penalty. That's been significantly reduced over the years. And the size limitations of VMs, be it number of CPUs, amount of memory that can be allocated, amount of storage that can be allocated, none of those limits are of practical consequence these days. So the monster VM that we talked about over VMworlds of 3, 4, 5 years ago, they're here to stay, and really those limits are no longer really practical impediments to virtualization. So vSphere has improved our organization by allowing us to deliver rock solid stability to our clients in a cost competitive fashion. The industry's moved far beyond bare metal infrastructure other than for very specific use cases. And so as an operator of mission critical applications on behalf of our clients, we chose vSphere because we needed the operability we get from features like vMotion, the stability that it gives us, and the ability to run pretty much any workload at this point. So vSphere management has been something that's evolved over time. It's inherently complex. Operating a large virtual infrastructure is no easy task for anybody. That's why certifications such as VCP exists, because you want to know that you have the right skill set to operate the environment. But as we look at the evolution and we start to take advantage of things, notably like DRS, workload placement becomes less of an issue for humans to worry about, because the system takes care of it for you. Of equal interest is SDRS. Storage management and storage placement historically was one of the most challenging things to manage in a large production VMware environment. With SDRS, we've actually seen our need to babysit that and manage that as a human go way down. We don't. So vSphere has been very stable for us. I don't think it would be where it is in the market overall if there were any sense of instability. It's interesting to think about no software is perfect, no hardware is perfect. So really it comes down to is the failure rate that we see running workloads on vSphere significantly, materially, measurably different than running those workloads on bare metal? I'd say absolutely not, but equally important, in some ways the stability is better because when things happen, you lose a piece of hardware. You have things like VMware HA to automatically restart those workloads, and the effective downtime is radically minimized compared to what it would be for a human response. So scalability on vSphere has always been something that's important for us because of the scale at which we operate. We had a client actually that had maxed out under the VMware 5 limit of 32 hosts per cluster. And so it's been great to see the continued improvements in scalability. As at the VM level, the limits are no longer practical impediments, and now at the VMware cluster level, we're also seeing sizes that can operate pretty much any large client environment. So we've had to use vSphere and VMware tech support in general on a fairly regular basis, to be honest, but not because there's fundamental flaws in the platform. Again, things happen, client environments are complex, and in some cases the interoperability of not VMware products per se, but with other third-party products requires engagement with support, and we've found that engagement to be able to solve our problem pretty much all the time. So I'm not directly involved in the day-to-day operation of our vSphere environments, but we actually stand up private vSphere-based clouds on a fairly regular basis, and we manage those on a go-forward basis in terms of patching and upgrading and things like that. Deploying vSphere it's pretty easy, to be quite honest. The biggest feature that's made that easier as compared to, say, 3 or 4 years ago is the vCenter server appliance. The ability to deploy the management plane as a virtual appliance and bootstrap an ESX environment, that's a big step forward. So, as with any piece of technology, hardware or software, there's always room for improvement. At this point, I would say vSphere is incredibly mature from a core feature and function perspective. I'd say if there were any areas for improvement, as we continue to push mission critical workloads into vSphere, and those workloads are not readily, let's say, protected at the application layer for availability, continuing to increase the size limitations on FT protected VMs would be a great advance. So as I think about what vSphere does in terms of ROI, I really think about it in 2 perspectives. One is as compared to deploying in traditional infrastructure models, namely bare metal, and without a doubt, the ability to virtualize and maximize the utilization of the physical infrastructure speaks well for ROI. The other one that's interesting is, in today's market, agility really is the new currency. And without virtualization and vSphere in particular, we wouldn't have the level of agility in the business that we have today. And frankly, it's needed by pretty much any industry, regardless of whether you're technology-centric or not, you are a technology company. So if I had to give a rating of 1 to 10 for vSphere, I'd give it a 9. Again, no software is perfect, no hardware is perfect. It's really good, and that's why I would say a 9, but there is still some room for improvement. Things like larger FTVMs, continued evolution and keeping pace with the scalability of underlying physical infrastructure. So for somebody looking to evaluate a virtualization platform such as vSphere or any of its competing, potentially, let's say, open source solutions like KVM or other virtualization platforms, I think one of the key considerations is to look at TCO. vSphere may seem expensive up front, and there may be some sticker shock there, but when you look at that over the long term and what it's going to take from a human capital perspective to operate the platform over a period of, let's say, 3, 5, or 7 or more years, the manageability of vSphere drives the total cost of ownership way down.